All right, Daf Yomi for the week, sponsored by Rabbi Aaron and Evelyn Kaslasi, Le'ili Nishmas, Rabbi Aaron's grandfather, Aaron ben Shimon, whose yahrzeit is on the 8th of Iyar, and B'schus Refuah Shlema for Yaakov ben Dina Chedva. We are 8 lines down from the top of the page on 7b, not 8. 7b, right? So Zion on my base. Yesh ba yadia batchila ve'ein ba yadia basof. We're continuing to march through our Mishnah, one line at a time, and we're going to just go through each one section, find out where the pasuk is that teaches me what that rule of the Mishnah is. This first line is that if you are aware first that you were tameh, then you forgot about it. Right? Sorry. Yesh b'yadia batchila ve'ein b'yadia basof. This one is that we had already the korban olav yored, which we already learned about, was the one where you knew about it, forgot about it, and then you knew about it again. Now the next case is, let's say you knew about it, and then you forgot, and you didn't remember yet. You didn't remember again. So that we said that the goat that was slaughtered, and the blood was sprinkled inside the Beis Hamikdash, that's in this week's parsha, is the one that atones for that avera. It really says it doesn't really atone for it; it delays the punishment. It's tola, right? It leaves us hanging. So we're going to discuss first of all what's the source for the fact that the inside is that you're going to read the pasuk from this week's parsha, and it's not going to talk about inside, outside, forgetting. It's going to talk about where the korban is. We're going to talk about what avera it atones for. So we're going to try to figure out how we learn that from the pasuk, and then we are also going to try to figure out what this concept of tola is. So,
Torah always gets more into details than or the
that's
books.
Ideally, I say always. Sometimes when it comes to tzaras, for example, there's a lot of detail in the Torah, right? And then there's a lot less. Some things are one way or the other. But yes, we're going to get into details now. Tana Rabban and Rabbi Zord. V'chiper ala kodesh mitum os b'nei Yisrael. That's pasuk in this week's parsha. Pasuk is Vayikra Tes Zion Tesvav, fully read. Make sure I read it right. V'chiper ala kodesh mitum os b'nei Yisrael. That will atone on the kodesh from the tumah of b'nei Yisrael, umipishehem, and from their sins. Pesha is normally a sin done intentionally. L'chol chatosam, for all of their other sins, which sounds like an inadvertent sin. And so you shall do in the tent of meeting, in the Oel Moed. So now we're going to try to explain this pasuk. Pasuk sat now. V'chiper hakodesh mitum os b'nei Yisrael. Yeshli b'inyan zeh lahavi shlosh tumus. There are 3 types, right? When pasuk says that this korban essentially is for the tumos of b'nei Yisrael. Now, what are the tumos? What avera is this talking about when we're talking about the tumos of Bnei Israel? There are 3 potential targets, 3 potential things that this could mean. Tumas avodah zarah. One could mean this refers to the tumah that's brought about by idol worship. The tumas gilui arayos, the impurity that's brought out through inappropriate relations. And tumas shfichus damim, the tumah brought out by murder. How do I know that the word tameh? So essentially we have to see how these 3 averos are related to the concept of tumah. So first of all, first one. Avodah zarah hu omer, when it comes to avodah zarah, the pasuk says, Leman tameh es mikdashi, right? Because you will, in order so that you will cause, if you bring the molech, if you bring your child to the molech, so then you are going to wind up bringing tumah to my holy ones, meaning Jewish people.
The molech means the gravesite?
The molech was, we talked about in Sanhedrin, was this process by which they took a baby and they brought him through fire in order to, whether it sounds like according to this, there's machlokas, whether it's avodah zarah, it's not avodah zarah, but if it's avodah zarah, so then it would be because of some deity that you're sort of doing some kind of sacrifice to, although it sounded like in the Gemara that the baby doesn't necessarily die in this process, just passing it through 2 fires, between 2 fires.
How could baby not die if you're passing through 2 fires?
Fire here. It's like a field goal right through.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, in between.
Yeah, in between the 2 fires, right? So that's right. Go quick over, right? So that was our argument in the Gemara that we had over there. You have to.
That's why that's the question.
Right. So therefore, that is how it was done. Okay. So now, So that's the Tuma of Avodah Zarah. Laman Times Mikdashi. Begilui Arayas Hu Omer, when it comes to the inappropriate relations, it says, Pasuk says, Ushmartem es mishmarti, you should guard my laws, right? Levilti asos mechukos hatoevos, and don't do any of these disgusting things. This Pasuk is also in this week's Parsha. Right, all the parsha it's a double parsha this week. Right, parsha also talks about the toevos, the inappropriate relations that people could have in the averos that are there, and it calls them that these are chukos hatoevos, and then it continues on. The pasuk says velo titamu bahem, and you should not become impurified through them. So again, we see the concept of tuma related to these illegal relationships. B'shvichos damim, when it comes to murder, pasuk says in Bimidbar, velo titame es haaretz, you should not make the land impure. So there are psukim in the Torah that relate the concept of tuma to these three big averos. So therefore, when we're talking about the korban that's in this week's parsha of the goat that is being slaughtered inside the blood is slaughtered outside, but the blood was sprinkled inside the Beis Hamikdash. What is the tuma that it's referring to? Maybe these three averos are good candidates. So Yachol al gimel tumos halalu yehei seir mechaper. I might think that the goat that is brought on Yom Kippur is for one of these three big averos.
These three big averos, they don't actually impart tuma.
Correct.
On the person.
Doesn't. The Torah describes them as tuma in some kind of capacity, right? If you read these psukim, you don't really see that there's tuma. We said, don't do this because it's going to impurify the land, but we don't have a concept of impure land, right? So we have it's sort of like a mystical tuma, kind of a impure idea, right? So that's potentially, but the Torah is equating it with tuma for a reason. So maybe it's in order to equate it with this korban, which helps with tuma. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, "Mitumos b'nei Yisrael." It is the tumos of the Jewish people. Velo kol tumos. So not all the tumos. Some of them might from the mem, I guess, from me tumos. It only is going to take care of some of the tumos of b'nei Yisrael. Not everything that is tameh does this fix. So now that means it's not going to fix all of these averos. So
this is not Azazel, right?
This is the other one, exactly. This is the other goat, right? The Azazel, we're going to learn later, as we said in the Mishnah already, we'll discuss later on, that's going to take care of all of our other averos, right? This one is taking care of this specific tumos, whatever that is. So ma matzinu, shechila kakosov miklal kol tumos. So what is the one tuma which we see that the pasuk says you're going to take one of the tumos? That means that the Torah is telling us there is one time that the Torah takes tuma and makes it an exception to the general concept of tuma. So we're looking for an exceptional tuma, an exceptional case of tuma. So what's in a case of exceptional tumos? So Havi Omer tumas mikdash ukdoshav. This is the circumstance of tuma of somebody who comes in contact with somebody who's tummy who comes in contact with the Beis Hamikdash or a korban. Why is it unique? It's unique because the general rule in the Torah is that when you violate an avera, that in the punishment, the Torah tells us the punishment is kares, the consequence of doing that avera negligently is a korban chatas. Those two go together. Kares chatas. Those two things always go together. But we learned yesterday, in a rather confusing, or at least the way I taught it was confusing way, Gemara, we learned that when it comes to the tuma, tuma where the person is tameh, and and he comes in contact with a korban or a holy place, the punishment is kares, but the korban for violating that tuma is the korban olav yored. Well, that's a very different korban. So this is unique. So you see, here's a concept of a certain tuma that doesn't follow the rest of the rules. So there you go. So we were looking for a tuma that is an exceptional case. Tuma of a person being tameh but touching korbanos and touching and coming in contact with the tumas mikdash is a perfect example of a unique case. So afkan. So here too, if the pasuk is going to say, right, our pasuk was v'chiper ala kodesh mitum os b'nei Yisrael, that this korban is going to atone from amongst the case of tameh of Bnei Yisrael, which is going to be a unique and exceptional case, this is the perfect case to use. So Afkan betumos mikdash ukdoshav. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, that's how Rabbi Yehuda learns it.
So don't we have a korban already for that?
Ah, good question. Yes, we already had a korban, but and we're gonna address that, right? The korban we have is the korban olav yored. So therefore, we're going to discuss that there's going to be a circumstance where you're obligated for a korban olav yored, and a circumstance where the goat offering for the inside on Yom Kippur is going to atone, and they can't be the same cases, otherwise you have overlap. But that's exactly correct. Yes. So that question needs to be. We put a sticky note on that one because that is exactly.
Another one from a cover.
There you go. Okay, so that's how Rabbi Yehuda learns it. Now, Rabbi Shimon says a little bit simpler. He says, "Mimkomo hu muchra." I don't need to go all around looking at cases of tuma and where it says tuma or any of that. I can look at this pasuk itself. If you read the pasuk, it sounds like this is the case that the pasuk is talking about. Why? Because Harehu Omer, the pasuk says later on the pasuk, V'chiper ala kodesh, it's going to atone for the kodesh mitum os, from the tuma, right? Which means mitum os shel kodesh. It's the tuma of coming in contact with something that is kodesh. So that's very straightforward, very simple. You just read the pasuk that way. So Yachol al kol tuma shebekodesh. So you might think that is going to apply to any circumstance of tuma and a Beis Hamikdash that's going on here, all kedushos. So therefore, the pasuk says, okay, Talmud Lomar umi pishehem lekol chatosam, from their sins, according to all of their sins. Now, a pesha and a chet are distinct types of averos. A pesha is an intentional sin, and a chet is a sin of shogeg, is a negligent sin. So therefore, what this pasuk is telling me, that obviously a korban is not going to take care of a intentional sin, rather it's going to take care of chatoyim dumya depshoyim. It's going to take care of a negligent sin, which is similar to an intentional sin. How so? Ma pshoyim she'enam b'nei korban, af chatoyim she'enon b'nei korban. So this avera, this korban, that the goat, what's it going to take care of? It's going to take care of, just like intentional averos are not atoned for with a sacrifice. There's no such thing as I did avera intentionally, I can bring a sacrifice. This korban is going to take care of some avera where there is no sacrifice, no other sacrifice that can atone for it. So we need a case where there's no other offering that is taking care of it. Okay, so now, sure I get that. I should make sure to distinguish between where I break up the lines to be able to make sure this is clear, right? We had, again, just to make sure we're here, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was he learned it from the psukim, that he has the words that he learns that it is the hakodesh mitum os b'nei Yisrael, and we said it was the unique circumstance that we were looking for, and he says, where's the unique circumstance? The unique circumstance is this case of Tuma and Kodesh. Rabbi Shimon said that it is just simply, the pasuk says, V'chaper ala Kodesh. It's from the atonement of the Kodesh. Very simple. Now, this next piece, which we say, is that you might think that this korban is going to take care of. We said we already have a korban for that avera. I already have a korban that if I was I was tamei and I came into contact with the kodesh, I have a korban olav yored. But remember that the korban olav yored was under specific circumstances. I needed awareness, then I needed to have forgotten, and then I needed to get awareness again. That's my circumstance of korban olav yored. So this umi pishehem tells me that if there's a circumstance where I already have another sacrifice, so then this goat on the inside is not going to take care of that. The only way to solve a avera that you already would be bringing a korban for is to bring that korban. Therefore, if you are tamei and you come in contact with kodesh, and you were aware, then you forgot, and you were aware again, you have to bring your korban olav yored. This korban has nothing to do with that case. So therefore, you need to be you need to have this circumstance, you need to have a circumstance where you're not otherwise going to be liable for a sacrifice. So there are a couple of other choices, right? You can have other circumstances where you're not liable for sacrifices. if you didn't have awareness at the beginning and then you had awareness at the end, right? You could have a circumstance of awareness you've forgotten. So which of these circumstances that are, or you never had any awareness, right? You had never had any awareness, you're not bringing a sacrifice either. So this goat is going to take care of one of those circumstances.
But all those also we have korban.
Well, first of all,
All those cases.
we don't have a korban if you never knew about it at all, because otherwise you can't bring a sacrifice. We also don't have a korban for when you knew about it and forgot about it and you still don't know about it, right? Because you can't bring korban if you're still in the status of not knowing, right? You're right, we do have a korban of a circumstance where I didn't know about it and then I became aware of it afterwards. But at this point, we don't know we do, right? Because remember, the Mishnah said that that's going to be the Musaf offering on Yom Kippur, or the Rosh Chodesh offering, or the Musaf on the Shalosh Regalim. But up until this point, the only circumstance we know that an individual has a korban for is if he knew about it, forgot about it, and knew about it again. So therefore, we know that this korban is going to take care of one of the other three circumstances where there's no individual korban for it.
And this is not the same idea as covering the category of everything?
Correct. Yeah, Azazel is taking care of everything else. We know from the fact that the pasuk, either from the fact the pasuk says "V'chaper hakodesh mi tumos," that it's referring to the korban, that it's referring to a avera having to do a tuma, or "V'chiper hakodesh," that it comes only to take care of tuma and kodesh. So therefore, we know that it's dealing with this avera specifically. We know it's dealing with an avera of tameh touching kodesh, and we know it's not talking about the circumstance where we had awareness, forgotten, had awareness. That's all we know so far. Okay, so we know what it's not. So we're working our way up to what it is based on knocking off what it's not. Now, process of elimination. That's correct. So now we're going to go the other way. Minayin liyesh ba yediyah batchila ve'ein ba yediyah basof sheseir zet toleh. So how do we know? We're talking about a circumstance where you were aware, then forgot that what this korban is going to do is going to protect you until you remember again that you were tameh. Because remember, if you were in a status, right now happens to be Yom Kippur, you had Tumah, you forgot about it. If you become aware again, this korban is not going to help you. Now you got to bring your korban of Yored. This korban is only helping you if you're in the middle stage right now where you were aware, but you forgot. How do we know that this is the one that's going to help? Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, Lekol chatos sam, chayave chatos b'mashma. So this is a circumstance of all of your chatos, which means that this is going to, that it is talking about going to provide some kind of atonement and fix for a circumstance where you will eventually be able to bring a korban for it.
So,
And I'll explain what that means.
There's something I don't understand. If in the middle he forgets,
Yes.
and there is a korban for that.
Yes.
This one that we're talking about.
This korban, the goat offering on the inside
So
of his
if there
mission.
is a korban while he's forgetting,
Yes. Then why does he have another korban at the end?
yeah,
Right?
it doesn't make sense. That
Good.
he's-
They're going to ask the next question. Okay, good. That's a good question, right? So at this point, what we know is, we know that this korban is for the circumstance where you knew and then you forgot. Why? Because since this pasuk says that it's lechol chatosam, that it's for all of your averos, for which you would bring a korban chatos, it must be talking about the circumstance where you knew and forgot. Why? Because only in that circumstance is there a potential in the future for something to happen where this very same avera is going to turn into a korban. I knew, I forgot. What if I find out again later? Then I've got to bring a chatos. Since I'm going to find out later, I'm going to have to bring a korban of yored. So therefore, this korban is going to take care of that in the meantime. Now you say, why do I have one korban? Why do I have two korbanos taking care of the same avera? That's the question we're going to deal with next. But what we know it can't help us with is a certain circumstance where I didn't have awareness first, and then I became aware. Because if I didn't know first, and then I became aware, there's never a circumstance where I'm going to bring a korban chatos for that. And for sure not. So therefore, for sure it wouldn't work if I wasn't aware at all. Because then even if I become aware in the future, I'm still not going to bring a korban ol v'yored. The only way for me to eventually bring a korban ol v'yored is I've got to have the first two steps of the three steps. I knew, I forgot. Okay, because if I got to I knew, I forgot, and then I knew I'd be already chayav the korban. I'm now in the step of I didn't know yet, so don't have the korban, but I have the potential of being liable to a korban later on. So, let's discuss this brisa, each one of these lines of this brisa. Now, we have a brisa that explained our Mishnah. Now let's go line by line through this brisa and explain what's going on in this brisa. We sort of already explained it as we were going, but now we get to go through this brisa in greater detail again. So now we zoomed in 2 times, now we're going to zoom in 10 times. Okay? Amar Mar, we first of all said, Yesh li be'inyan ze lahavi gimel tumos. We said in the brisa that since the pasuk says, V'chiper al hakodesh mitumos b'nei Yisrael, this offering is going to take to forgive us from the tumos of b'nei Yisrael. And we said there are 3 times in the Torah that big averos are referenced as tuma. Tumas avodah zarah, tumas gilui arayas, and tumas shvichos damim. Right, those were our 3. So hay avodah zarah hechi dami. What's the circumstance of avodah zarah? What is how could we be? So this is the Gemara talking a second. Let's look at this brisa in clearly. We said you're telling me that there's a sacrifice. The havamin of the brisa is there's a sacrifice that I'm going to be bringing because I did avodah zarah. That's what you're suggesting. So, what circumstance? How could this possibly work? Ibn Mazid, if you did this avodah zarah on purpose, bar katalahu, then you're going to get the death sentence. In which circumstance, there's no sacrifice that's going to help you on Yom Kippur. B'shogeg, if you did avodah zarah b'shogeg, so then what would happen? You bring a korban chatas, right? So if you bring a korban chatas, so bar korbanhu, so then you bring a korban. So what circumstance? And as we learn later on, if you're already going to be liable for a sacrifice, this korban is not going to help you. So what's the circumstance where somebody does avodah zarah and they're not liable a death sentence and they're not liable a sacrifice? That this Gemara is suggesting, that Bryce is suggesting that as a possibility.
So someone that does avodah zarah could be interested in bringing a korban?
Yeah, if he did a b'shogeg, right? Let's say somebody, right? You were going on a tour, and the tour goes here. Everybody come in over here. We're going over here. We're going over here. And then, hey, and this is the church, and you walk just into the church and whatever, and you're like, oh, I did not realize, right? You could wind up, doing avodah zarah b'shogeg. You didn't know, right? So therefore, you bring a korban for that.
How do you not know if you see a cross right on top of the building?
Right, as I was saying, you don't know what religion you're involved in, right? You could, right?
Somebody walks into a house and
That's good. That's correct. They would keep their heads down low, right? These things, right? So the answer is b'mezid v'lo asur bi. I'll give you an example. What if you did the avodah zarah on purpose, but there were no witnesses around to warn you? Right? If you didn't get any witnesses around to warn you, you didn't get the misa. That's what this korban could be for. Or b'shogeg v'lo isyadolei. Or let's say the guy did the avera b'shogeg, he did the avodah zarah b'shogeg, but he never found out that he did it b'shogeg. Right? He's living his whole life. He never knew that the thing that he did was really avodah zarah. He went to the amusement park. He's throwing rocks. Think he's playing the game. Didn't realize it's merciless. He thought he was not supposed to knock it down and get a stuffed animal, right? And he didn't realize it's merciless that he's doing there. So so if he never finds out about it, right? So then he can't be chayav. So therefore, he's not chayav a korban because you have to know your avera. You have to admit your avera and do tshuva in order to bring a korban. So therefore, yeah.
If he does find out about it, he's still.
Then he could be chayav a korban. That's fine. Then he is chayav a
But
korban.
you didn't know while he was doing it.
That's always shogeg, right? Shogeg is you don't know while you're doing it.
Keep away from those carnival games.
That's right. The merciless ones. Okay. So so therefore we have a couple of circumstances where it makes sense that avodah zarah was one of the potential candidates. Okay, on to Chesam and Aleph. Gilui arayas nami hechidomi. So how do you have gilui arayas? Like, where's a circumstance where you've done an illicit relations, and you're not chayiv for any other punishment, and you're going to have this Yom Kippur service is going to take care of you. Heichidami, how do you have it? Iba mezid, if you did it on purpose, bar katalu, then you're going to get misa for it. Iba shogeg, if you did it through negligence, bar karbanhu, then you have a korban to bring. So the answer is b'mezid v'lo asur bei. Same answer. Could be you did it on purpose, nobody gave you a warning, or b'shogeg v'lo yisyad delay. Or he did it b'shogeg, he never found out that the person he was with was really somebody who was osur to him. Right? Didn't know. Shvichas damim nami, hechidami. So how do you do the murder? What is murder? How does that wind up being? So ibamez, if you did it on purpose, bar katolu, you'd get killed. B'shogeg bar golasu. If you did it b'shogeg, then you go to golas. So the answer is b'mezid v'lo asur bei. Could do it on purpose and nobody was there to give him a good warning. Or b'shogeg v'lo yisyad dalei. Or it was b'shogeg and he didn't know he committed it. Didn't know he committed the murder. Inami, Bahanach Dilav B'nei Golos Ninu. Or you could have a circumstance where through a technicality, even though he was negligent, he's not chayav golos. Like, for example, we had the circumstance where he was swinging upward, not downward, or the circumstance where he threw the rock and the other person stuck his head out afterwards, right? Even though you negligently killed, you're not liable for exile under those circumstances. So therefore, we can have a circumstance, okay, so we understand where the Havamina, right? That was the Bryce's opinion. There could be a circumstance where you have no other atonement, and this korban would help you. So therefore, we said, the Bryce then said, Amar Mar, Yochel al sholosh tumos halolu yehei seir mechaper, that you might have thought, again, we're quoting back to Bryce, you might have thought that on one of these three examples of tuma, that would be what the goat for Yom Kippur would take care of. Talmud Lomer, therefore the pasuk says, mi tumos, from amongst the tumos, the lo kol tumos. Not every tuma we're talking about, so therefore we have to take a look. What's the example where we have an exceptional case of tuma, where the tuma doesn't follow the rules of other averos in the Torah? Generally speaking, if the answer is betumos mikdash ukdashav, the tuma of somebody who is tameh, who touches korbanos or comes to the base of mikdash, because generally speaking, somebody who does an avera b'mezid gets kares, gets b'shogeg, brings a korban. When it comes to tuma that touches a korban or the area of the Beis Hamikdash, b'mezid he gets kares, b'shogeg he brings a korban olav yored. That's a very different korban than a regular maintained korban chatas. So therefore, afkan betumas mikdash ukdoshav. So here too, we're talking about the tuma of the mikdash and the holy and of the Beis Hamikdash and the kodshim. So that's how Rabbi Yehuda. That's how Rabbi Yehuda learns. Okay, my chalak. What is the difference? What is, again, this I explained this already, but what is the distinction that is different about this avera, this type of tuma, and all of the other types of averos? Because demaisi ba'olev yored, because you're going to bring a korban olev yored. Okay, well, if that's the distinction, ema avodah zarah. I'm going to give you another example of an avera that is out of character, avodah zarah. Because umay chalak, what is the distinction? Demaisi seira velo kisba. Normally, when it comes to any avera, right? We said you get kares if you do it on purpose. If you do the avera b'shogeg, you bring a korban chatas. Normally, when you have a korban chatas, you have a choice. You can bring one of two animals, right? You go to the marketplace, whichever is cheaper, a goat or a sheep, your choice. Okay, that's your choice. But when you do avodah zarah b'shogeg, you do not have a choice. The Torah tells you you must bring a goat. Sheep is off the table. Even if sheep are cheaper, you must pay for the extra for the goat. Okay, that's the rule. So therefore, we see that that's a distinctive rule by avodah zarah. So why is it, since you told me that avodah zarah was tuma, and it has a distinctive rule to it, why can't that be what this korban is for? So Amar Rav Kahana. So Rav Kahana says, "Onon chilek lehakel kamrinon, v'hai chilek lehachmirhu." He says the answer is we're looking for a consideration for some kind of leniency. Remember, we're looking for a additional type of atonement. To be allowed to have atonement, we're talking about a more lenient avera. That's why we're going to add a korban that's going to take care of it. So when we're looking at evaluating types of mitzvos, let's take a look at this avodah zarah. When it comes to avodah zarah, every other avera can bring a goat or a sheep. Avodah zarah, you can only bring a goat. Why? That sounds like a stringency. I have more choices when it comes to every other avera. With avodah zarah, it's more precise, more specific. So that's a chumrah, that's a stringency. When it comes to the tumah that touching the korban or the Beis Hamikdash area, generally speaking, I have to bring a goat or a sheep. But with this, I can bring a variable offering that depends whether it's birds or whether it's a flower. I've got all kinds of choices and leniencies. So therefore, when we're looking for the exception, it makes sense to use the exception. That's the leniency, not the exception. That's the stringency. That's why when we are going to pick Tumos B'nai Yisrael, we're going to pick the lenient difference. Okay, so that's right. So that was the first choice. Well, what about Ema Yoledes? What about a woman who gives birth, right? De chalak, Yoledes de chalak or chilak. What is that? Is that Yoledes de Dechilek, he says here, right? You have cholak also? You have cholak? As I wasn't sure exactly. There's an argument between the grammarians and the various vowelized versions. So, a woman who gives birth, right? This is back in last week's parsha, in the Tazri Masorah. A woman who gives birth, we know her tumah is different than everybody else. When she gives birth, so for a boy, she's tummy for 7 days. For a girl, she's tummy for 14 days. And then she's pured for 33 days for a boy, 66 days for a girl. And then after that, she has to bring korbanos. Now, she brings a korban olav for that as well. Now, it's not the same olav that we're talking about in our averos that we're talking about, but it depends on her wealth what type of korban she can bring, whether for birds or for animals. So, we're saying that when it comes to yoledas, she's different. Her tumah is different in that she also brings a different leveled korban. That's a leniency. So there's tumah there, and there's different levels. So how do we know that the korban of Yom Kippur isn't for that? So Amar Rav Hoshaya, so Rav Hoshaya answers, Lekol chatosam velo lekol tumasam, because the pasuk says that this korban is for all of your sins, not your impurities. The woman who gives birth is impure, that's true, but she hasn't committed an avera. So how is a goat on Yom Kippur going to help her? She hasn't done an avera. When it comes to somebody who is tameh, who then goes to the Beis HaMikdash, he's done an avera. He's gone to the Beis HaMikdash. That's why the goat is going to take care of that avera. This is not an avera.
She could be upset at her husband.
That's the next answer. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. What about according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who says, Damar, he says, Yoledes nami chotes he, that a woman who gives birth, she is a sinner. Why? Because, according to that, because we learn in Mesachas, where is that? That is in Mesachas Nida, makes sense. That Mesachas Nida, she says that while she's going through childbirth, she has all kinds of negative things to say about her husband, and never having babies again, and all of these kinds of things. So she's also a chotes. That's why.
Pushing it before she pushes.
It's painful the whole time. So So how are you gonna explain? So what's the problem there, right? That's what the Yom Kippur Avodah is for. It's for that avera. So Rav Shimon l'ta'amei. So the answer is no. Because remember, Reb Shimon is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, that's the same Reb Shimon, and he says, De Amar Mimkamahu Muchra, he doesn't even hold that we're learning it mitumos in the first place. He's the opinion that says later on, Lechaper, right, that he says that it's Lechaper al Tumos. He says, you read the pasuk, it says that it is, that this is for the mikodesh v'chaper al kodesh, that is for the kodesh. He looks at the pasuk itself. He doesn't need this drush at all. So you're right. According to his shita, she's doing averos. Maybe it could apply, but he doesn't use this drush at all anyway. So that you don't have to worry about it. Okay. So now, ema mitzorah. What about another possibility? What about somebody who has tzaras? So somebody who has tzaras is tameh, and his korban is very different, right? He also has an olav yoreh, depending on his financial ability. He's going to bring a different korban as well. So why don't we include that case? So Rav Hoshaya says, same answer. Because tzaras is a tumah problem. It's not an avera problem. Having tzaras is not an avera. Having tzaras makes you tameh. What about
tzaras to begin with?
Oh, so that's the question. Rishmuel Bar Nachmani. What about Rishmuel Bar Nachmani that says to Amar? He says Al Shiva Dvarim Negoyim Boin, that there are 7 reasons a person gets tzaras. It doesn't say in the Torah that it's a punishment for something, but Rishmuel Bar Nachmani says it is. You can speak lashon hara, right? Shfichos damim. There are all kinds of different averos, things, negative things that a person does, spiritual averos that cause tzaras. Hence, you're right, tzaras is a tumah, but the atonement could be for whatever avera you did that caused you to get tzaras. So Michael Amemar, so how do you know that that's not what this offering on Yom Kippur is for? So the answer is Hasam Negia de'achaper le bekorban lishtiruye bekahal. The answer is that when it comes to tzaras, the punishment for the avera is the tzaras. The korban is to purify you from the tzaras. In the case of tumah, that when you touch tumas mikdash, the korban olav yored is the atonement for the avera, and that's the difference. When you're going to tell me that this korban for Yom Kippur is going to come for an avera that you would normally bring a korban to fix, tzaras, it doesn't have a korban to fix it. Tzaras is the fixing, and the korban is to take care of the tumah. right?
But
So
the
it's a
blood,
tincture.
the blood is when it fixes the tzoras.
The blood fixes the tsaras, right? The blood and the water and the oil and all of the whole process. That's what. No, sorry, take that back. That's not what fixes the tsaras, right? His tshuva fixes the tsaras, right? Well, we're saying it does fix. The answer is yes. It fixes the tsaras in the sense that he is no longer tummy once he goes to the korban. I should say that. Yes, you are correct. Now, ve'ema nazir de chilek de maisi toru b'nei yonah. What about a nazir? Nazir also. If he is, somebody declares he's a Nazir, he's not allowed to come in contact with the dead. Nazir comes in contact with the dead, he has to restart his Nazirus, and he has to bring a Korban Olav or one of these, another type of offering again, that is variable offering. So then if that's the circumstance, if he has to bring a variable offering, maybe that's the circumstance. He did the Aveira. So, V'amar Hoshaya, the answer is, Rabbi Shai answers the Kol Chatosam V'lo Chol Tu Mosam. The answer is, again, he has to do an Aveira. This is, he's just bringing the birds in order to restart him from his tumah. It's not an Aveira that he did, he just became Tameh. Well, Rabbi Elazar HaKafar, what about Rabbi Elazar Kafar? Da'amar Nazir Nami Chotehu. That a Nazir is a sinner. The idea that you would swear and disavow yourself of wine is a bad thing to do, right? And I understand that some people feel the need that they have to do that in order to protect themselves. But ultimately, it's not the best way to live your life is by abstaining from pleasures. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar Kafar says that somebody who is a Nazir, there is an Aveira element to what he's doing, and therefore he has a sin offering at the end. According to that makes sense that the Korban on Yom Kippur might be helping you for that Aveira. So Ma'ikal Meimer. So what are you going to say to that? So the answer is Suffer like Rabbi Shimon. The answer is he holds like Rabbi Shimon. He doesn't use the drush. You're right. That could work. It could fit into the pasuk, but he doesn't use that part of the pasuk anyway. He holds like Rabbi Shimon. Damar mim komahu muchra. He uses the fact that it says mikol v'chiper al hakodesh, that this is an avera that is being atoned for, the avera of coming in contact with the kodesh. Okay. So now let's get back into the brisa again. More next step in the brisa. Mar said, Rabbi Shimon says, Mim komahu muchra. That was Rabbi Yehuda's drasha, that it was from the mitum asam. Now back to Rabbi Shimon's drasha. Rabbi Shimon says that you look at the pasuk says, Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, V'chaper al kodesh mitum os. Right? This korban on Yom Kippur is going to atone for the kodesh from its tumah, from the tumah of Bnei Yisrael. Mitum aso shel kodesh. It's going to become the avera. This atonement is for the tumah of something which was kodesh. So Shapir come Reb Shimon. So that's a great answer. Reb Shimon, read the pasuk. It makes good sense. Why does Rabbi Yehuda goes through a whole methodology of trying to learn it from the psukim? Rabbi Shimon is so much easier, so much more straightforward. Why don't we learn it like Rabbi Shimon? So Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Lach, Rabbi Yehuda will say to you, Hahumi boile ki hechi da'avid lifnei v'lifnim, hachi namid behechal. The answer is that Rabbi Yehuda says that part of the pasuk, v'chiper al kodesh, isn't describing the Aveira that you did, like Rabbi Shimon says, that's the Aveira that you did. No, he's telling you that all the pasuk tells you is that you're supposed to sprinkle the blood in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Then it says, V'chiper al Kodesh, you should also atone on the Kodesh. You know what that means? That means you go then walk out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim into the Beis HaMikdash area, and you perform the atonement service on the Kodesh, just like you did in the Kodesh HaKadoshim.
How you're walking into the Beis HaMikdash tummy?
Sorry?
Aren't you walking to the Beis HaMikdash?
This is on Yom Kippur. This is later. This is when the Kohen's doing it properly, right? So he's got the blood. He's done it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Then he goes outside into the Kodesh, and he sprinkles the blood in the Kodesh as well. That's what the pasuk means. V'chiper al Kodesh isn't talking about the Aveira. It's talking about the process. So Rabbi Shimon says, Hahu, now that law comes from a different part of the pasuk. The pasuk says, Mi v'chein ya'aseh, right? So you shall do, right? You shall do this also in the Ohel Moed. So that's where it tells me that I'm supposed to sprinkle it in the Ohel Moed. So that's where he learns it out from that. For Rabbi Yehuda will say to you, if that was the source of the law to sprinkle the blood in the Heichal area, Havamina Nesi Parvis Seir Achrini Venavid. I might think that what it means is V'chein Yaseh, do this whole process again. Meaning, go get yourself another bull, go get yourself a second goat, and do the whole process. V'chein Yaseh, do the whole thing again. How do I know? Kamash Malon. So this is saying that V'chiper al Kodesh, use the same blood and put that on the Kodesh. So Rabbi Shimon, V'chein Yaseh lo amoid minei mashma. And so Rabbi Shimon says, That he says v'chein yaseh lo moed. He says that sounds like you're supposed to use the same animal. So that's really where the question is. So practically speaking, there's no difference of viewpoint, right? Practically speaking, you're going to sprinkle it in the Kodesh Kashim. You're going to sprinkle it in the Kodesh. You're also going to atone for the same Avera. It's just a question. We call this mashmal's dorshim. It could be different ways of learning the pasuk. Whether you learn one part of the pasuk is telling me to do it in the heichal, another part of the pasuk in the heichal. Then, if because I use that other part of the pasuk to tell me the heichal, I need to be able to use some other part of some other drush in order to tell me which Avera it is. But in the end, that's how we learned Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Now, the next part of the brisa was Amar Mar said. Yochol al kol tumos sheba kodesh yehi seir zet mechaper. You might have thought that this is going to help atone for any time that any kind of tumah comes in contact with a korban or into the Beis Hamikdash. Everything. Talmud Lomar. Therefore, the pasuk says, "Mi pishay em l'ol chatosam," from your intentional averos and all your sins. So, therefore, we need to have something. We need to have something that is not eligible for that would a korban where you would not be eligible for atonement through your own personal sacrifice. Right, and that was our issue. We said we already have korban oliviored. We already know that. So therefore, my nihu, what's the sacrifice? What is the circumstance that we are excluding? Yesh ba'yadia batchila v'yesh ba'yadia basof. This is the circumstance where if you knew at first, forgot in the middle, knew at the end, this korban on Yom Kippur is not going to help you for that. So hi bar korban who? So he says that. But of course that wouldn't help. We already brought a korban for that. In other words, if you knew, you forgot, and you knew. So then before Yom Kippur, you would have already gone to the Beis Hamikdash and brought your korban. Why would I ever need what would be the circumstance where I would ever need Yom Kippur to help me out? I would have brought my own korban by now. So the answer is lo tzrich. I'll tell you the circumstance. This yodele samach l'shkia sechama. He says what happens is the guy is thereby he's in Yerushalayim and he's watching. His wife is lighting Yom Tov lighting candles for Yom Kippur, and he goes, "Oh wait a second! I just realized I was tamei." Now it's too late. It's already Yom Kippur. He can't do the atonement. So therefore, if he had remembered yesterday, he would have just gone to the Beis Hamikdash and brought a korban. But now he can't because it's too late. That's when Yom Kippur helps him. When he got stuck, that was the Havamina, right? I thought of that. That would be the circumstance. I might have thought, Demaisi, before I get to, since I didn't have a chance to bring it, I might bring it, Nisli, Lay, that this is going to now, this korban on Yom Kippur is going to protect me until I can bring my own. Kamash Malan, the answer is, so sorry, this korban does not help you either. You are stuck over Yom Kippur with no solution to your own korban problems, and after Yom Kippur, you better get it taken care of. Okay, next part of the Brisa. Omar Mar said, Minayin sheyesh ba yediyah batchila ve'ein ba yediyah basof, says seir zet tola. How do I know to say that? What about the circumstance where I know at first, then I forgot? That's when this works. I knew, then I forgot. That's when it works. Minayin. My kakashale. He says, where do you know it from? What's his question? This is what he means. Now that you said that this is going to be a circumstance where you have a negligent sin, similar to an intentional sin. Ma psha'im delav b'nei korban, just like if you did it negligently. You would not be liable to a sacrifice. So we also need a circumstance where now, af chatoim, it's a negligent circumstance, nami, delav b'nei korban, that you are not liable to a sacrifice. So, ema, so I would have said, Map sha'im delabnei korban li olam, then why wouldn't I use some of the other circumstances, like the circumstance where I didn't know first, and then I found out? That's a circumstance where I'm not only not liable to a sacrifice now, but I'm never going to be liable to a sacrifice. Because even if I find out later, since I didn't have knowledge originally, I'm not eligible for a korban oliviored. Maybe that's what this is for. So avchatoim delav b'nei korban liolam, I'm going to also use a negligent circumstance where I'm also never going to be obligated in a sacrifice. Umaynihu, what would those circumstances be? Ein ba yediyah batchila v'yesh ba yediyah basof, a circumstance where I didn't know at first, and then I became aware. There's no sacrifice for that. The only sacrifice is for when I did know, then I forgot, and then I did know again. When I didn't know originally, there's no sacrifice for that. If I knew originally and then I did not know, that shouldn't be the one that's included. Because in that circumstance, if I become aware after Yom Kippur about my Tuma, Bar Korban, I can always bring my own Korban, which is not similar to an intentional Avera. Because an intentional Avera, there's never a circumstance where I'm going to bring a Korban. So why were you including this case where I might at some future point be liable for a Korban? So Ema, so the answer is lo litli. So this says it's not going to say that should not protect me, because why? I'm going to be able to bring a korban later. V'chi tema ein bayadia batchila v'yesh bayadia basof seir hanase bachutz v'yom kippurim mechaper. The answer is, well, you know why? Because if you'll remember, we already know from our Mishnah that if you are going to become aware at the end, so the goat, which is done as part of the Musaf offering, which is slaughtered like a regular Korban Chatas on Yom Kippur, outside, that's what that atones for, right? That's what that Korban atones for. Salp Kodaich Tochamina, well, maybe I might have thought, Nepuch Mepuch, that you've got it all backwards. Maybe the goat on the inside atones for the circumstance that will never result in a Korban, and the Musaf should atone for the other case, right? Maybe that's how it should work. So Amar Cross, so the answer is, you know why that can't work? Because the pasuk says, Lekol chatosam, right? That is for all of your sins. Mikal d'bnei chatos ninhu. This is for all your calls at your negligent sins, your averos, which means that these are the averos that you will eventually be able to bring a korban chatos for. So it's actually, the pasuk is specifically including to tell me that when I'm going to potentially be able to bring korban chatas, that's what the internal goat on Yom Kippur is for. V'nechaper kapara gemura. Okay, so the next question is, okay, so maybe what this korban, you tell me, I understand what this is for. How do you know that it only delays atonement and I still have to bring another korban later? This was bothering Rabbi here. He says, well, why do I need two korbanos for the same avera? Once Yom Kippur came and the goat was offered inside the Beis HaMikdash, that should solve everything. I've already got a korban for it. Done. I don't have to bring my own korban when I find out later. So the answer is, iksiv mechatosam, if it would say that it is going to solve from your averos, so kidekamart, then that would work your way. Hashdiksiv lechol chatosam. So the answer is, now that it says for your averos, your averos, lahanach de'asu leklav chatos. The answer is, it has to be those that are still going to come for a chatos. It's not going to provide you atonement from your sins. That would be mechatosam, atonement from your sins. This is going to give you atonement to your korban. This is going to give you a temporary atonement until you get to the korban that you have to bring. That's what likol chatosam means. So, okay, well, it doesn't atone. So then what is the purpose of delaying? What is it helping you? It's suspended sentence. So what value is a suspended sentence? I'm going to bring my korban when I find out about it anyway. So Amar Reb Zera says, Lo marshi mace. So mace below avon. The answer is because if you die before you find out about it, then you don't have to bring the avera with you to Shemayim. That's why. So Amar Le Rava says, Im mace misa memerekes. He says, thing is that death provides atonement by itself for many averos. So therefore, if you die with an avera b'shogeg still on you, the death itself is going to take care of it.
You don't need teshuvah at the same time?
You don't know. You can't do tshuva because you don't know about it.
You don't know. Yeah.
Right? You don't even know about it. So you can't do tshuva. But the death is going to take care of it for you. I don't have to worry about the Yom Kippur. Ela Amarava, so Rava says, Lehagein alav mina yisurin. It's to protect you from punishments. Right? In other words, I might not find out about my avera for another few months. Meanwhile, bad things could happen to me. So therefore, this korban on Yom Kippur is protecting me from bad things happening until that time.
Wow.
Okay? That's what it says. Okay, next. Next korban was, Ein ba yedia batchila v'yesh ba yedia basof. Next circumstance was, you didn't know at the beginning and you found out about it later. So, Seir hanase b'chutz v'yom kippurim mechaper. For that our Mishnah says, you have the korban which is brought outside on the Mizbeach outside during Musaf on Yom Kippur. That's what that korban is for. Right? The other, again, when you knew and you forgot and you knew again, korban ol v'yored. When you knew and you forgot, that's the inside korban. When you didn't know and then you become aware, that is There's no korban for that personally. That's what Yom Kippur's Musaf is for. Michti. So let's take a look here. Iskushi iskush lehadodi. So the psukim in Bamidbar tell you that the goat on the inside and the goat on the outside have to be similar in some way. What is the comparison between? What is the purpose of that comparison? So v'nechaper pnimi adide. So those two are compared together. V'nechaper pnimi adide v'adechitzon. So he says, well, why don't we say then that because of the comparison that the internal korban is going to take care of both of these averos? Right? We just have this hekesh. Maybe it tells me that if I bring the korban on the inside, the goat on the inside, so then it's going to take care of both averos, both if I knew and then forgot, or if I didn't know and then I became aware. The nafkamina, what difference does that make? I mean, it's Yom Kippur. I'm going to bring both korbanos anyway. What difference does it make? The answer is, leicha delo avad chitzon. What if you're in a circumstance where the base of mikdash only has one goat? And as a result, if they only have one goat, they're only going to bring one of the two korbanos. Which korban are they going to bring? They're only going to bring the internal one. So if they bring the internal one, did you get a kapara for the averos that you didn't know about and then found out about? So the answer is, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, achas kapara. It only has a single atonement, which means achas mechaper v'eda mechaper shtei kaparos. Each sacrifice only suffices to atone for one thing, not two. So therefore, one korban isn't going to take care of both of those circumstances. Okay, v'nechaper chitzon adidei. Maybe the korban musaf is going to take care of both averos. We understand that the inside korban can't take care of both, but maybe the one on the outside takes care of both. Nafkamina letuma de'ira bein zelazah. The nafkamina is obviously if you only have one goat. That's not the nafkamina because you're going to use it for the inside anyway. But what happens if somebody became tamei and walked into the Beis Hamikdash through negligence after the morning sacrifice was already brought? Now it's too late. That the tamei can't use the morning atonement. He's got to wait till next year. So does the one in the afternoon take care of him or not? So Makra, the pasuk says at the end, achas b'shana, by the korban musaf, it says once per year, meaning kapara zu lo tehei ella achas b'shana. This kapara is only to help you one time per year. That's it. Okay, so korban, this is a place to stop. 2 hours.
The